That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about Sonic the Hedgehog 3, the third film directed by Jeff Fowler, which Paramount Pictures is releasing December 20th, 2024.
Do I know this director's other films?
You do. Sonic the Hedgehog and Sonic the Hedgehog 2, both of which we have reviewed.
Those are the three films he's done?
Yeah.
Wow.
Although he is an Oscar nominee for an animated short called Go for Broke back in 2015 alongside Tim Miller. Tim Miller went on to direct films like the first Deadpool.
Okay.
One of those Terminator movies.
What is Sonic the Hedgehog 3 about? Sonic, Knuckles, and Tails reunite against a powerful new adversary, Shadow, a mysterious villain with powers unlike anything they have faced before. With their abilities outmatched, Team Sonic must seek out an unlikely alliance. What's your pull quote?
The third time's the charm as far as the Sonic franchise goes, although its anthropomorphic characters still pale in comparison to the secret comedic weapon that is Jim Carrey.
Mine. Jim Carrey is glorious in this third installment of Sonic the Hedgehog.
Is it a powerhouse performance?
It really is. This review could be 30 seconds, and I would just say, you have to see this for Jim Carrey. He is so damn good in this.
I wish that we could have the Jim Carrey cut and excise everything else. Notably, he said he was going to retire after Sonic 2, so in the press rounds he's been asked about that over and over again, and I think has been joking that he needed the money. But it sounds like he's kind of lost interest in working in the industry unless it's something really special. So indeed, this might be one of the last times we'll see him for a while.
Oh, he's so good in it.
Yeah.
But we'll get into that more. The story is basically the premise. The unlikely alliance is with Dr. Robotnik, Jim Carrey's character. But in this film, we see that Sonic is now living with his parents, foster adoptive parents, whatever, James Marsden and Tika Sumpter.
Tom and Maddie.
And joining him are Tails and Knuckles from the last movie. Mm-hmm. And they're just one big happy family.
Yeah.
We see that across the globe in Japan, there is another hedgehog that's locked up in some government facility. And that
held in hydro suspension.
That hedgehog is named Shadow, and that hedgehog is voiced by Keanu Reeves. Mm-hmm. And he all of a sudden wakes up, which is kind of like, okay.
After 50 years.
After 50 years, off of the memory of this young lady named Maria.
This dead little girl.
So he is very powerful. The government agency that's holding him tries to stop him. They can't. They go get Sonic, Team Sonic, which is Sonic, Knuckles, and Tails, to go try to stop Shadow. They can't do it. And then this mysterious person on a motorcycle finds them, and it turns out to be Agent Stone, who is Dr. Robotnik's assistant.
Played by Lee Majub, who we've seen in the past two films as well.
And he says, I need you to come with me, and basically takes Team Sonic to Dr. Robotnik. And Dr. Robotnik is sort of been self-exiled, and he's sitting in his little, what would you call that? It's not a spacecraft. His little, mobile headquarters.
Yeah, sure.
But he's let himself go like Thor in one of those Avengers movies.
I think it's Endgame.
Endgame? Mm-hmm. So he's just sitting there watching his telenovelas when Agent Stone explains, okay, you all need to join forces because Shadow is too powerful for Team Sonic. And Dr. Robotnik, you might want to get in on this because whomever Shadow is working with has stolen your technology. And that gets Dr. Robotnik real hype. So he says, okay, we'll have a truce so we can go stop this Shadow and whomever they're working with. So they find out who Shadow is working with. And it is a scientist who was working at the facility 50 years ago when Shadow was first there.
And is basically Shadow's mentor.
Shadow's mentor. And why is this person doing this? Because that person is Dr. Robotnik's granddaddy.
Gerald.
Played by Jim Carrey. So Jim Carrey's playing two characters, and they're both funny as hell. And that little granddaughter, who is Dr. Robotnik, his sister, effectively, she was killed in an incident at the facility, like inadvertently. So of course that destroyed the grandfather. And then she was also like best friends with Shadow.
She was the only one that showed him love.
And we need to talk about that. So of course Shadow was devastated. And so the memory of her woke him up like 50 years later. So when Dr. Robotnik realizes that's his grandfather, he says, well, I want to join forces with my grandfather. So now the world's in trouble. But everything culminates in Dr. Robotnik realizing that his grandfather is not trying to take over the world like he is. He's trying to destroy the planet. He's developed this laser.
Destroy the planet and themselves.
It's like a suicide thing.
Yes.
So that's when Dr. Robotnik goes, okay, this is too much because I want to rule the world, not destroy it. And I damn sure don't want to die. So he wants to stop his grandfather. And Shadow has been like unrelenting in his desire to get revenge. But Shadow inadvertently like badly injures James Marsden, but doesn't realize it's James Marsden because James was wearing like a suit that can make him transform into someone else.
The hologram.
A hologram. So Shadow thinks he's killed like the general who was in charge of the program. But when Sonic sees that James Marsden might be dead, he's very sad. So Shadow recalls how he felt when Maria, the granddaughter, died. So he decides to act right. And they all go to stop the grandfather. They kill his ass. But of course, that laser is already in motion, so they can't like stop it. So we find out that in order to really stop the world from being destroyed, the people on the ship trying to move it have to die, like because it all explodes. So we see Shadow and Dr. Robotnik on the ship when it explodes, but who knows if they're actually dead.
And we see Gerald, to quote another science fiction film, get blasted out of the goddamn airlock into space.
And then Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles go back to living their happy life with James and Tika, the end.
Until Sonic 4, yep.
And then there's a post-credit scene where we see, I'm assuming it's Sonic's girlfriend.
Oh yeah, the pink thing. What was her name?
April
Rose.
April Rose. I think that's who it was.
I don't know. They don't say it, and I didn't play this game as a child, so I'm not sure.
But yeah, it's so crazy that we watched this the day after The Lion King, Mufasa, The Lion King, because this movie gave me everything that The Lion King didn't. Like fun moments. Like I teared up 2 times.
As far as for the purposes of who the general audience should be, which would be children, yes, I do think it's strangely much more successful and has something for adults.
And like there are very clear messages, like moral messages.
Yes, like don't hold on to your trauma, forgive. And,
forgiveness.
Yep.
And yeah, so I mean, it's crazy that like if you would have told me like, oh, Disney's The Lion King versus...
Well, that's going to be majestic and grand.
Right, versus this 3rd installment of an old Sega video game.
Especially since you like this film more than I did, but in my opinion, of the 3, strangely, it's the best one. Because I loathed Sonic 2.
I thought Jim Carrey was funny.
Jim Carrey's been the bright spot across the board. But...
So what do I like? Of course, Jim Carrey is like 10 out of 10. I, in the last film, thought Idris Elba as Knuckles didn't really work.
Not as like a main
because he's like mad. But in this one, now that he's friends with Sonic and Tails, and like he's a good guy, his like sort of gruff nature is cute because he's not trying to do bad things. I think there are a lot of cute little details because there were a lot of kids in the screening and they were laughing at a lot of stuff. The adults were laughing. I think it looks just fine.
Sure. I don't like the look of Sonic and Friends. I like how they sound even less. It's just every time they're on screen, I just feel like repelled a bit. But as a film, it doesn't look like the effects don't look bad. It's like a video game when they're doing things.
When we start the film, we see that Tika and James and the Team Sonic are like having a picnic. And then there's like this weird race.
That they're standing right in front of these creatures to start the race.
Well, and then so the race is between Tails, Knuckles, and Sonic, but they get to like the end point when Sonic realizes, oh, he was racing against holograms. And so at first you're like, oh my gosh, is this like a setup? Is there going to be a fight? But then we realize it was all a plan to get Sonic away from the picnic site. So that when he returns, they can all say, surprise, because it's his happy birthday, but they spell it like be Earth, because they're saying it's celebrating like when you came to Earth. But then he mishears them and says like, oh, happy B. Arthur Day. Jokes like that I thought were funny.
Well, I think what's interesting is that it's not trying so desperately to be contemporary, and have pop songs that are, of the moment.
Well, that's my next thought, is that we end up in Japan because Team Sonic has to go try to stop Shadow. And they end up at this because they have to kind of be incognito. And so the only place they can go is like some Japanese like arcade cafe where everyone does cosplay. So they don't look out of place. And we have these really cute characters. There were references I didn't quite get, but kids were laughing. I think they were like Pokemon references. But then we have this band that's kind of like the Chuck E. Cheese animatronics, but they're singing the Jackson 5 in Japanese. And again, I thought, wow, this is just, it's not trying so hard to be contemporary.
No, and actually,
it's just funny.
I think what's kind of strangely touching is the montage sequence that's showing a Shadow's relationship with Maria is set to the Traveling Wilburys.
Yes.
Which, I don't know, it gave it's kind of this disarming, sweet edge.
Then we meet Jim Carrey, and he's in his little mobile headquarters, which looks like a big crab. And he's sitting there with his pot belly and his hair really long. And he's watching a show called like La Última Pasión. And then we see like a scene from this like Spanglish language telenovela. And Jim Carrey's like all excited. We see him preparing like a microwave burrito. It's just every moment of him on screen is funny.
It was reminding me of Goldie Hawn in Death Becomes Her.
Or that, yes.
Before her, she revamps herself.
But when he decides to help Team Sonic, he has to change into like his normal outfit, but he can't fit into it because he's gained weight. And then Agent Stone has to give him a haircut. So we see the physical comedy of Jim Carrey. To think that, what year was Ace Ventura?
94.
So 30 years later.
But he'd been doing stuff since the 80s.
No, I know, but it's just like to think that for 30 plus years, this man...
This kind of manic physicality.
And the energy is still there. I mean, he's not doing the full-on, like, wacky body stuff because, I couldn't do that either 30 years later.
But a lot of it's facial expression.
But the facial stuff, but the energy he's bringing to it.
Well, and he does have an artistic consultant credit, and I'm assuming that most of the best moments of him were probably improvised. And I was talking to you right before this, the only other person that has ever seemed like this comedically, I mean, maybe Lucille Ball, but Robin Williams.
Yeah.
As enabled, they bring so much. You get so much more than what you bargained for, which, in the case of Man on the Moon was maybe not a great scenario for him to do that. But yeah, I don't know. There's no one really else. And having not seen him in anything besides these films for the past, 8 years, I don't know. It just, when you watch him here, it's like, God, you miss him.
Well, and I hope he seems like he's having a lot of fun. And so it translates onto the screen. There were too many funny things he said for me to write down, but one was, he says, my attitude renders me undesirable to all genders. My love life is a cul-de-sac. Okay, one part of the plot that confused me is, so Shadow, we're told, like, the government found this, like, extraterrestrial piece of matter or something that fell from space, and it contained Shadow. And then they realized that his power was
chaos energy,
and he needed to be contained. Which I'm confused why we didn't contain Sonic. Or was he contained?
I don't know.
I don't remember
now.
I don't remember the first two
They
movies.
keep referencing Longclaw or whatever, his owl mentor.
Oh, there was an owl, yeah. I don't remember these movies, but we see that the grandfather, Dr. Robotnik, who was the one working with Shadow, he had a granddaughter, Maria, and she would visit the work site, and she became like best friends with Shadow. And so Shadow is locked up in this facility, like this high security, maximum security place, but somehow she's able to just take him to the roof, to the garden.
Yeah.
I was very confused by that.
Yeah, it's
Like, is she sneaking him out, or are they letting her?
it's not all making sense. But the imagery we get of them bonding is sweet because it shows her watching. They're watching some old sci-fi movie, and they're talking disparagingly about the alien, and it affects him. And I thought those were kind of
I
sweet
agree.
touches.
Okay, we do get characters from the previous movie. Rachel, played by, what's her name from Insecure?
Natalie Rothwell.
Yes, and Shamar Moore.
Yes.
And they have an interesting scene. So Tika and James have to sneak into the headquarters
In London.
And
Because there's a mechanism of them needing 2 keys in order for them to activate
this laser weapon.
the laser weapon that's orbiting Earth that Gerald Robotnik had
created. That's right. And James and Tika know that they just can't stroll in there. So they use this hologram suit to turn into Rachel and Shamar. And at first it's funny because, you know, they're both being kind of fun. And Shamar's like, because James is acting like, oh, now I look like Shamar Moore. So he's like, how hot am I? And I thought that was all cute. But then they get inside and Shamar asks, oh, we're here to visit so-and-so. And
for lunch or something.
For lunch. And they're like, oh, we're currently on lockdown. No. And the part that did rub me the wrong way is then Rachel goes, well, let me take care of it. And then she gets like angry and sassy and...
She gets aggressive.
And then they go, and then the guy running the counter goes, oh, I'm sorry, just go ahead and go in. I don't know how I felt about
There's
that.
a way that could have worked, but she's not giving the attendant any details or anything. She's basically just strong arming her way in.
It read to me like this white guy is afraid of this black lady
Yes.
getting, and that didn't quite work for me. But, okay, I'm trying to think what my favorite Jim Carrey moment is, and it might be at a point, because the area where the key is, they have like all these laser beams, like Mission Impossible. And of course, Dr. Robotnik has developed a suit that can absorb the lasers. So basically, they're safe.
Not on their head, though.
Well, I assume that because didn't he say like they will attract the laser to the suit,
Sure.
so it would never touch his head? But we know that these lasers not only set off an alarm, but it disintegrates whatever it touches. And so he has successfully fashioned 2 suits, one for himself, one for his granddaddy, which makes me think of David Mann.
Yeah.
He had a song called This Is Your Granddaddy. But anyway, they do a dance. The 2 characters, which are both Jim Carrey, and I'm assuming they superimposed Jim Carrey's head onto 2 dancers' bodies. But I thought that was so fun.
Well, into the music, yeah, it's kind of borderline magical, yeah.
Yeah, that was a highlight for sure.
But there's another scene where I forget what they're doing. They're searching for something, and they're looking for his old technology, and that's where they also run into Shadow. And that's where he first meets his grandfather. But he's chatting to Sonic, and he's like, I'm not done trauma dumping.
That's right. There's also a moment where he has to escape something, Jim Carrey as Dr. Robotnik, not the grandfather, where he's like sliding on the ground like boot camp. I thought that was funny. Also at the point where Agent Stone is on Earth while Dr. Robotnik is in space. And so they're communicating, and Agent Stone's saying like, you can't do this. You don't understand. Your grandfather his plans are not your plans. Like, you need to stop him. But at that point, Dr. Robotnik doesn't know what his grandfather wants to do. So he tells Agent Stone, you know what? You're unsubscribed, blocked, and reported. Okay, I don't remember this from the last movie, but apparently there's this Master Emerald.
Yeah, which I believe goes back to the game.
So Sonic, and then we're told that Team Sonic had agreed that they would never use it again. But then Sonic says, I need it. That's the only way I can stop Shadow. So he uses it, and that's how they meet. I don't know. Yeah. And then the chaos energy, again, I'm not quite... There are a lot of little details that I'm like, I'm not quite sure. Like,
it glosses over them, yes.
It does. But yeah, we learn ultimately that the grandfather, his feeling is that humanity is a failed experiment and everyone needs to be destroyed, including himself. And I thought, I don't fully disagree, but... I can see why for kids we need to make
Don't
sure.
make that decision for
Yeah.
me.
And then part of the process in stopping the laser is they can't turn it off, so they have to kind of turn it away from Earth. Which immediately I thought it's going to tear up other.
It's going to tear up something.
It's going to tear up something else, and sure enough, it slices the moon like by a third. But I'm like, wouldn't it go on for infinity? Like,
I don't know.
it's going to tear up other planets. Anyway.
Then we have Kristen Ritter in there, who doesn't have much to do. She's the director general of whatever agency has come to commandeer Sonic and his crew to save the world from Shadow. And she really has nothing to do.
And her characterization was odd because I wasn't clear if she's like good or bad.
Yes.
Wasn't that kind of like, I don't understand what she's trying to do here.
Although you thought it was Ava Green.
I still think it's Ava Green, but
But I think she's starting to look like Barbara Steele.
she has a great look, but yeah, she had nothing to do really.
And then I used to think there were times when Barbara Steele looked like Michael Jackson. So there's a whole spectrum there.
Anyhow, I would definitely watch this movie again. If I had to recommend for a family either Mufasa the Lion King or Sonic the Hedgehog 3, it's crazy to think that.
It is crazy, yes.
Overwhelmingly, I would say go see Sonic the Hedgehog 3.
I concur with that.
Right?
I never thought I'd say that, but yeah.
What would you give this film?
Well, again, you liked it better than me. I look back at my previous ratings for this franchise. The first film I gave 2, Sonic 2 I gave a 1. So this I'm going to give 2.5.
I really enjoyed this movie. I'm giving it 3.5 out of 5. Join us on Patreon and listen to our podcast. Bye.